Well, good morning. Thank you very much for having us. We're very glad to be here. My name is Aileen Ford, and I'm accompanied by my colleagues Lindsay Read, Rebbeca Hornback, and Seymour. And we're here to present some of our findings from a year-long policy research project, which we did in collaboration with the RGK Center and with the Meadows Foundation. So we are also not accompanied by two of our other group members. They couldn't be here in person, but they're here in spirit. Alex Leist and Marcotte. So we definitely recognize them, and also our professor, Dr. David Eaton, for all their support and for all the support of Dr. Klein and the Meadows Foundation. So what we would like to do is give a brief overview of our presentation, how the project came to be, the goals and methodologies that we used to create it, and then we would like to segue into showing the documentary video, which we produced and filmed. And then we would like to finish by going into a discussion about our comprehensive report with some of our policy findings and general recommendations. So over the past year, we've been working really hard as a group. You can do the next slide. Oh, excellent. We've been working really hard as a group to support the goals of the newly established Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute for the state of Texas. And we've been doing this by looking at the current status of mental health services for returning veterans in the state of Texas. And we did two concrete deliverables. We did a documentary video, which you will see momentarily, and also the comprehensive report. And to do these concrete deliverables, we adopted two general approaches. One was from the bottom up, and so we interviewed veteran service officers, the people on the ground who are working at nonprofits to actually deliver the services, mental health services, to veterans in different parts of the state. We visited Dallas, we visited different areas in Austin, also Killeen. And we interviewed a lot of veterans themselves to see what their opinion is about the types of services that are available, the accessibility, and how we could potentially improve the access and quality of the services that are there. At the same time, we also took a top-down approach where we were looking at the federal, state, and local level policies, the funding structures, and how the general environment of services interact with the grassroots organizations that are providing the on-the-ground services. And so that included an analysis of agency websites, scholarly literature, and also some interviews with VA administrators and former counselors. And so now we'd like to segue into the video. This is a documentary, so we hope you enjoy it.
How do you pick a traumatic moment? You know, a year in Afghanistan, 32 firefights, 10 friends that got killed. Which one was the one?
It doesn't matter what color you are a soldier. And so we don't ask for help. And that transitional phase is deadly if you don't prepare yourself.
So a lot of times our veterans, they're out of the military. We've had lots of them tell us that they're at home looking out the Venetian blinds at the world go by.
And you start to become isolated and feeling like nobody understands you and you can't trust anybody.
Hey, I was fine. It was everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with post-traumatic stress.
It got to the point where I had planned to commit suicide, and I did everything that the depressed person would do. I quit going out. I quit hanging out with people. Let my grass grow in my house.
We got 22 veterans a day that are out killing themselves, and that's it's a tragedy on so many different levels that it's really not one that we can sit back and wait for this to occur.
The day that I was planning on doing it, I was sitting out there saying, and something just came across my mind and said, what if you miss? What if it's not your time to go?
If you qualify for the full range of veteran services, it tends to be a fairly robust package.
They have VA mental health clinics that are outpatient clinics where you can go get clinical counseling, psychiatric services. They have inpatient centers for PTSD. They have inpatient centers for substance abuse. The services are there.
To qualify for mental health services, You have to have one of what we call the big three diagnoses: major depression, one of the schizoaffective disorders, or bipolar.
The VA, they try very hard with the resources they have, and within their purview, they're pretty good at what they do.
Yeah.
But they miss a lot.
If service members, veterans, and families choose not to use VA services, or there's a barrier to VA services, transportation. If you've traveled this state, it's a big state, and there's a lot of people that don't live near anything, much less a VA clinic.
Because when veterans come home, when they're making that transition, there's usually a multitude of things that they're dealing with. Behavioral health may just be one piece of it.
When I look at the veteran who's drinking because he's PTSD, he's not drinking, in my opinion, because he's an alcoholic. I think they're self-medicating because of the PTSD.
Hardest to reach population, in my opinion, is going to be our homeless. Those who most likely have mental health issues and the most likely to not receive proper care.
Got a lot of local nonprofits that have kind of stepped in to fill the gap where there have been a need in services that aren't being met.
We're all nonprofits. We're all trying to help each other. We're all wanting to serve veterans. And my veteran may need your services. We do sessions with a licensed mental health professional, the equine specialist, the horse, and a client. It's just coming out to a safe, healthy, fun environment where it's other veterans. Most of our volunteers are veterans or family members of veterans.
I mean, there's all kinds of unique environments to put an individual in that then resonates with them to where they open, something shifts, some sort of healing can occur, some sort of opening can occur that then they can share something with somebody that then can then help them process that, whatever it is that works for that individual. We need it all.
It's a phase of life issue. It's a difficult phase of life, but it's one that if there's a little bit of targeted intervention at the right time, and it's the kind of intervention that makes sense out there, then vets come out on the other side just as successful as they were in the military.
The number one thing is we need to adequately fund mental health services.
The intervention needs to be smart. We can't just throw dollars at it and expect it to be successful. We have to be coordinate our resources and apply those interventions strategically.
It's the education and awareness within the veterans and the community. It's training and educating Lufkin on veteran issues and the veterans within their community and the veterans within there. It's Tyler. It's that local level, how they can do it.
I do encourage that we stay focused on very concrete projects.
We train for the purpose of them starting peer groups. The whole purpose of peer support is to inspire someone else's hope.
Being a counselor or going through the training, I'm able to say, it's going to be okay. They don't believe me, but you got to give them hope. You don't want me talking to them no more? Is that what it is? This is my heart.
My name is Lauren Seymour. I'm a first-year Masters of Public Affairs candidate.
My name is Aileen Ford, and I have a veteran connection to my family. My grandfather was in the military.
My name is Alex Leist. I have personal connections to veterans from my friends, and my grandfather was in the Air Force.
So for me, one of the biggest things was putting a face to the overall veterans population and putting a face to mental illness.
I think veterans' mental health is an issue that a lot of people are aware of, but they don't really understand the intricacies and a lot of the details of it.
I think it would be really helpful if some of the state money could be allocated or kind of funneled more towards the community aspect, so the nonprofits out there. From our research and our interviews with people, it seems that the nonprofits that are helping to fill the gaps that perhaps the VA or the state can't cover are very effective for helping veterans with mental health issues.
My opinion of the veterans courts that we saw both here in Austin and Dallas is that they're a very innovative and interesting way to approach the intersections of different mental health and substance abuse issues that veterans are facing. I liked that a lot of the judges were veterans themselves or had a deep connection with the veterans community. They had that sensibility and that knowledge that you can't always have when you're a civilian.
And so I think these kind of coordinating bodies can help bring in all parts of the community to try and work on this problem and tackle it together.
My biggest takeaway from the project was meeting the professionals and seeing their connections to veterans and how deeply they care. And most of them are veterans, so it was impressive to see them return to continue their service to help their fellow veterans to get all the mental health and physical health services they need.
And I thought that it was a good thing to see the variety of backgrounds of different veterans, to know that veterans come from all walks of life, men, women, socioeconomic levels, and that really we can all be a part of the solution to the challenges that they're facing, and we should.
The most innovative services that I saw were the alternative practices when paired with traditional practices such as therapy or psychiatric care. So pairing that with acupuncture or tai chi or riding horses.
I think the best practices for serving veterans' mental health are the all-encompassing one-stop shops, where they would include mental health services, physical therapy, as well as job placement and preventing homelessness.
I think the best practices were the veteran-run organizations, or at least the organizations where veterans were heavily involved, particularly eQuest with equine therapy, where veterans were hands-on working with other veterans. Also one-stop shops, particularly Heroes Night Out, when you have the peer-to-peer network where people are really coming together in a single place, having a lot of workshops, a lot of informal conversations, just camaraderie really, and having a welcoming environment to bring veterans in.
The best way for community members to get involved is to directly reach out to veterans and educate them on the services that may be available if they are not aware.
Anything that can kind of help bring a veteran out and help them want to seek further help.
My greatest takeaway is definitely the passion that a lot of people bring to this issue, and just how much the state of Texas and a lot of key stakeholders are doing to increase access to services and to improve their quality.
The most profound moment for me was realizing how big of an issue military sexual trauma was, because I had never actually heard about it or thought about it before, and there's large numbers of veterans who have suffered MST during their service.
One final thing that I would like to say, the impact of mental health for veterans is not just something that's individual, which is important. It's also something that's affecting their families and their larger communities and their children and their caregivers and their employers. So it's definitely something that affects us all as Americans.
So since the commencement of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, over 1.5 million troops have been deployed and have returned back to the U.S. Texas is the home to the second largest populations of veterans in the United States. We have 1.7 million veterans living within our border. The psychological costs that these veterans are facing returning from combat are increasing. We see increasing numbers of veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, as well as increasing rates of suicide. Additionally, many are suffering from depression, as well as substance abuse, and some are suffering from the after effects of military sexual trauma. These These issues affect not only the veteran themselves, but also their families, the caretakers, the caregivers, and the communities at large that surround these veterans. And the economic benefits and the economic costs associated with helping these veterans are significant. There have been some studies that suggest that for every $1 invested in evidence-based care for veterans' mental health issues, there's a resulting $2.50 in benefits over 2 years. There's many different kinds of treatments available, which Lindsay will discuss momentarily, but the most common tends to be psychiatric care or counseling. This can be paired with things such as job placement, legal help, as well as alternative practices as discussed in the documentary, so Tai Chi, equine therapy, or acupuncture, whatever works for the veteran. And so the magnitude of this problem has caught the attention at both the federal level and state level policymakers. At the federal level in 2008, the Veterans Mental Health Care and Other Improvements Act was enacted, and so this was to enable the VA to access and improve the services they had for veterans dealing with mental health issues. And then in 2012, there was an executive order signed by the president, and this created the Interagency Task Force. So it was a task force for veterans' mental health, and it was comprised of the DoD, the VA, as well as HHS. And then at the state level, during the 81st legislative session, Texas allocated $6.5 million in new funding to help access as well as to help improve the services available to veterans. And so now Lindsay will talk a little bit more in detail about those services.
So one of our goals with this project was to assess the landscape of existing services for veterans, especially in the realm of mental health care. So we wanted to give a snapshot of what we found at both the federal, state, and the local nonprofit level. As I'm sure you're all familiar, at the federal level, the DoD and the VA are the two main actors in the provision of mental health care services. The role of the DoD is to identify veterans or identify service members who are in need of treatment, to transition and to ensure continued care either through the DoD or the VA, as well as to educate veterans and family members on possibilities of future mental health challenges and where to access those services. The role of the VA is to provide timely treatment for new veterans as well as those who are referred by the DoD, and as well to screen every new patient for mental health care issues when they seek primary care. Now, both the DoD and the VA have prioritized veteran mental health care within their services. The DoD, for example, created the Defense Suicide Prevention Office. This was in 2011 to oversee the development of policies and procedures to prevent suicide across all the armed forces. As well, the VA has integrated mental health care into every level of its programming. It's created inpatient treatment centers and a full array of supportive services. Again, as an example, they created the Suicide Prevention Coordinators, which provide extra support to veterans showing signs of suicidal behavior, including multiple check-ins throughout the week as needed. Now, at the state level, we have multiple programs, both at the state, county, and local city level. At the state, just as an example, we have the Texas Veterans Commission, which sees itself as an advocate for veterans in terms of services and benefits. They provide integrated systems of care and utilize outreach and peer-to-peer networks. We have the Health and Human Services Commission, whose role is oversight, coordination of services. Their major resource is 211, which provides live help to veterans seeking services and connecting them. We also have the Department of State Health Services, which has 39 local mental health coordinators, which deal with crisis services, family care, rehabilitation. At the county level, special veterans courts have been successful at identifying behavioral health needs, providing representation, as well as funneling veterans into mental health care services as they are needed. And then at the city local level, there's additional public services. Just an example, the Austin office trains the city department on legislation related to services and benefits for veterans. Now at the nonprofit level, recently there's been a large influx of nonprofits working in the field of veteran care. This has been referred to as the Sea of Goodwill. As you can see, since 2001, almost 8,000 nonprofits have registered with the federal government to care for veterans. In Texas alone, there are almost 600 nonprofits working in this area right now at almost 800 locations. These organizations touch every aspect of veteran care, from counseling to crisis intervention, family resources, workforce reintegration, advocacy, housing, every part. The success of these organizations is that they relieve the burden on state and federal agencies, but they also provide specialized and innovative care that kind of fall outside of that government bureaucracy. The most visible example in Texas is TexVet, which is a collaboration between federal, state, and local nonprofits to enhance benefits and provide services. Some of their major programs include a peer-to-peer network, an online services provider network, and then the Austin's Veteran Family Advocacy Council, which seeks to engage the community directly to make VA services better.
So during our conversations with veterans and advocates over the past 9 months, there were certain themes that kept popping up about what were the challenges and the opportunities in Texas for serving veterans with mental health challenges. And some of the challenges that came up over and over again were the challenge of getting transitioning veterans into care, starting with when they finish their service in the DoD and move back into their communities, how to get them into care when it's needed. Another was the issue of serving underserved populations of veterans with special needs, who have dual diagnoses, such as homeless, unemployed, those who face substance abuse, those with other than honorable discharge, and those who had military sexual trauma. That those particular vets needed special services and weren't always able to access them. As well as this idea that there's a lack of civilian understanding, that the public doesn't always understand what that veteran experience is, and so the veterans tend to feel even more isolated and stigmatized. But then they also voiced these this hope for what's working in Texas and opportunities to expand on those. And some of those were the peer-to-peer support networks that are popping up throughout Texas, and this new peer-to-peer approach for treatment that can both augment counseling, more formal counseling services, are more sustainable, and can reach out to veterans that aren't otherwise hard to reach. Also, there's a growth in individualized care, so using alternative treatment types, looking at the veteran as a whole person, and not assuming that every type of treatment works for every type of veteran. Also, there's an increase in integrated care models, such as the Bridge in Dallas, the Heroes Night Out program in Cedar Park outside of Austin, places where veterans can go and access a lot of different services, thereby kind of leveraging maybe their interest in one service. You can kind of hook them up with other services that are available. Also, we saw over and over again that areas or organizations that had veteran leadership were really the most successful organizations, and that those veteran leaders were able to bridge some of the gaps between the community and the veterans. And also that there were some signs that the community, the wider community, really was interested in supporting the veterans in their communities, and there was signs that they were taking action to do that. And so, based on those conversations with the veterans, the advocates, the leaders, as well as our own literature review and research, we put together a set of recommendations that are also in the report. And so we set up some recommendations that are at the federal level for state actors, for nonprofit actors, as well as for the system in general. And this kind of is a sampling of what those recommendations are. One is to improve that transition out of service back into the community and provide care where needed. Also to enhance the outreach efforts to groups that are harder to reach. Also improving the awareness of the programs, not only among the veterans, but among the different organizations that are providing services, to avoid duplication of efforts and to really identify and fill the gaps in service. You'll see that we did create some maps of the organizations, both federal, state, and nonprofit organizations, and layered that upon concentrations of veterans throughout the state. So you can see geographically where the areas where veterans maybe aren't getting the services that they need. Also rebranding some of the services that exist so that they're more appealing to veterans, particularly younger veterans and their families. Expanding services to the underserved groups, make sure that they're getting the care that they need. Increasing support to the families and their caregivers. And also increasing feedback loops. We saw a great example of that in Austin, where the VA has a monthly meeting, which is facilitated by the Austin Veterans and Family Advocates Council, where veterans and their families and nonprofit groups can go and provide feedback to the VA and say, you're not providing this service, we need you to be more responsive on this. And those kinds of feedback loops increase trust and open doors of communication. So trying to replicate that type of model. And also building upon the many successes that are happening throughout the state. There are a lot of really wonderful things that are happening in this area, and trying to create mechanisms for duplicating, replicating, scaling up the things that are working.